The first was Virelon 3, a colony moon with a population of 20,000 and a defense pact with the Dominion. Gone, entirely. No bodies, no ruins, no distress call, just scorched earth, melted stone, and a lingering radiation pattern that didn't match any known weapon. At the heart of the blast zone, one thing remained untouched. A crater carved into the shape of a Terran military crest, long obsolete, long forbidden. Above it, orbital logs showed a brief disturbance in gravimetric readings, like something huge had passed through, then silence. The second was Archon's Gate, a once independent trade hub. Population 312,000. Evacuated, according to logs, but the evacuation ships were never found. The planet's orbital station was torn in half, by kinetic force, not plasma. No signs of alien assault, no viral attack, just impact, as if something had rammed it with purpose and cruelty, and once again, in the centre of the blast pattern, a perfect mark in the soil. This one too bore the symbol of a Terran battleship class that hadn't existed in 100 years. The Aegis L line, decommissioned, scrapped, forgotten. They started calling it the Reaper ship. Whispers spread, a ghost vessel, a rogue AI, a human war machine gone mad, or worse, gone free. The Dominion sent fleets, scouts, black ops. They found nothing, just more dead worlds, and one common factor, High Marshal Krex of the Dominion Defense Command had seen 1,000 wars, crushed 12 rebellions, and executed whole star systems with the press of a button. He had never been afraid. Until now. "Show me the footage again," he said, staring at the playback from Virelon 3. His aide, a Narcan with twitching spines, complied. The grainy footage came from a deep mind sensor array, a single frame captured before the signal died, a silhouette, a ship, angular, brutal, massive, human in design, but far too large for any standard class. No lights, no escort, just one solitary juggernaut drifting through the upper stratosphere. No transmission, no heat signature, and then gone. Krex leaned forward. "That shape, that hull," the aide whispered. "It matches nothing on record, except..." "Except what?" The Narcan swallowed hard. "Except the ISS Devourer." The Devourer was a myth, a prototype Terran dreadnought built in the last days of the Earth Wars, when humanity was cornered, furious, and willing to sacrifice anything to survive. It was said to be the first battleship to run not on crew, but on neural residue, digitized minds of dying soldiers fused into the hull, a ghost engine, a war machine powered by memory and rage. But it was never launched. It disappeared in orbit, classified under Terran Black Archive 9X. The file was sealed when Earth fell, now it was back, and it was angry. Fleet Admiral Sarah Quinn, Terran exile, wasn't surprised when her old encryption key lit up for the first time in 23 years. She was living in a backwater rim station, fixing agricultural drones and drinking herself numb. The message came through a rusted transmitter she'd rebuilt for fun. One line, "Hearth Black returning, witness or burn." She stared at it for a long time, hands shaking. No one else knew that code. Only her old crew. Only the ones who died screaming when the Devourer was locked into deep orbit and left to rot with its crew still aboard. Half alive, half machine, all betrayed. She thought of her captain, Elias Mordain, brilliant, brutal, unforgiving. The last words he ever said before boarding the Devourer as a volunteer, "If Earth burns, we become its flame." Now the flame had returned, and entire planets were turning to ash in its wake. Quinn activated her emergency beacon, one she swore she'd never use again, and far away in dark corners of the sector others like her stirred, old ghosts in human skin, war criminals, heroes, survivors, all with one thing in common. They had once served aboard the Devourer project, and they were the only ones who might know how to stop it, because if the Devourer was truly awake, then every world that had betrayed Earth, every species that had signed the Terran Surrender Pact, every system that had forgotten the war humanity almost won, was already marked, and the only thing worse than a human warship full of ghosts was one that remembered its mission. Sarah Quinn hadn't worn a fleet uniform in 2 decades, but the moment she slipped the faded jacket over her shoulders, something inside her clicked back into place. Not pride, Not loyalty, but readiness. The old encryption code still worked, somehow. The beacon she'd activated sent a one-time pulse into deep space, masked in obsolete Terran military frequencies. Anyone listening on modern channels would hear nothing but cosmic static. But they would hear it. The survivors. The ones who had served aboard Project Devourer. The ones who had built it, crewed it, and bled for it, until Earth fell and Command severed the link, leaving them adrift in a shell of steel and wrath. They should have died, but apparently they hadn't. Not completely. 3 days after the pulse, Quinn's station got a visitor. Not a ship, not a transmission, a person. He arrived in the cargo bay. No logs of a shuttle, no signs of airlock use. Just there. Tall, gaunt, wrapped in what looked like an old Terran shock trooper coat, fused with cables at the seams. His left eye was a glowing blue lens. His voice echoed with something unnatural. Fleet Engineer Sarah Quinn. Ghost Protocol Alpha has been activated. She stared, trying to keep her hand from shaking on the grip of her sidearm. Who are you? I was Lieutenant Bram Kesek, Communications Officer. I am now Ghost Node 7. Her breath caught. You were on the Devourer. I am the Devourer, he corrected. Bram sat across from her in the rusted galley of the Rim Station. Or rather, what used to be Bram. His mind, his memories still lived, but his flesh had long since been repurposed. Nanite veins ran through his skin like circuitry. His voice glitched at times like he was tuning a signal, but his eyes, one human, one machine, held clarity. The Devourer is awake, he said. It's no longer executing commands. It's remembering. Remembering what? Quinn asked. The list. She hadn't thought of the list in years. The roster of planetary systems responsible for Earth's collapse. Political collaborators. Systems that turned their backs when humanity begged for aid. Those who signed the isolation accords and then blocked Earth from the galactic network. She helped compile it, back when vengeance had a name and coordinates, before guilt set in. Why now? She asked. Bram's eye flickered. The ship was dormant, waiting, healing. When the Dominion triggered subspace collapse near Virulon 3, it lit up old neural paths, memories, pain, rage. The ship responded. You're saying it woke up because of grief. I'm saying it never slept, only waited for us to remember who we were. Quinn stood and walked to the console, pulled up the map. 4 dead worlds now, each with a Dominion signature, each with no survivors. They'll try to spin it, she muttered. Say it's a rogue AI, blame old tech, hide the truth. That is the truth, Bram said. It is rogue, but not artificial, not anymore. The Devourer was no longer a machine. It had become something else, something born of war, loss and betrayal. Not quite a ship, not quite a mind, something between. There has to be a way to stop it, she whispered. Bram's human eye softened. Not stop, speak. That's why I'm here. It remembered you. That was when it hit her. The pulse she'd sent wasn't just a beacon. It had been a summons, and the Devourer had answered. Back in orbit, the stars shifted. The Rim Station's long-range sensors lit up like a firestorm. It was there. No flash, no distortion, just presence. The Devourer had arrived. Quinn stared at the display. It shouldn't have been able to fly. Its drives were experimental, its systems ancient. But it drifted through space like a god made of armor and vengeance, miles long, pitch black, its hull scarred with the names of its lost crew, carved into the metal in long looping trails like epitaphs. The Dominion fleet scrambled. 15 ships, modern, armed, fast. They surrounded it. Quinn held her breath, and then the Devourer spoke. Not through sound, not through language, but through memory. Every ship's AI went offline. Every captain saw something different. A child's scream, the flash of Saul burning, an old command order, their own betrayal, and one word burned into every sensor feed. Remember. The Dominion ships powered down, drifted, shaken, not by fear, but by remorse. Only one channel remained open. Quinn's. The Devourer whispered through it. A dozen voices fused into one. Engineer, return to us. The mission is not over. She swallowed hard. You said you remembered. We remember pain. We remember fire. But also, you. We remember doubt. She lowered her head. I buried that list. And yet we carry it still. She didn't have an answer, but she did have a choice, and the Devourer was waiting. The docking corridor extended like a tongue from the Devourer's hull, seamless and smooth, without welds or lights. It wasn't just steel, it grew from the ship, extruded like a limb. Sarah Quinn stepped inside, alone. The air was breathable, but it felt charged, like she'd stepped into a cathedral with a heart still beating beneath the altar. Her boots echoed, but not against metal. The corridor absorbed sound, just enough to make her question her own presence. Do you fear what you helped create? The voice didn't come from comms or implants. It came from within the walls, a whispering blend of familiar voices, her captain, her crew, even her own, recordings taken during the final weeks of Earth's fall. Quinn didn't answer. She moved forward, heart pounding. The Devourer had changed. It was no longer a warship built by human hands. It had become a cathedral of memory. The walls pulsed faintly with living code. Some parts of the hull had been reshaped into what looked like bone or scar tissue, self-healing metal that had grown organically around trauma. Every corridor displayed fragments of battle logs, flashing like hallucinations in the corner of her vision. Then she reached the central chamber. Not a bridge, a chamber, circular, vast, dark. At its centre hovered a massive sphere, a black node veined with blue-white light. It rotated slowly, tendrils of data trailing like the arms of a jellyfish. She knew what it was. The core. The fusion of the original command matrix and the minds of the volunteer crew, fused in death, preserved by desperation. And now it pulsed with awareness. A platform rose beneath her feet. She was lifted toward the core. Sarah Quinn, project engineer, Earthborn. You abandoned the mission, but you remembered. Quinn steadied her voice. You're killing worlds. We are fulfilling the directive. Punish those who betrayed the human race. That was the past, she said. The war is over. We know. That's why they must answer for peace built on our ashes. The core split open, revealing thousands of light points, each one a name, a location. The list. It had grown, no longer just those who abandoned Earth. Now it included systems that profited afterward, corporations, cultures that rewrote history, archives that erased Terran contributions, entire species that taught their children that Earth's collapse was inevitable or deserved. The list had evolved from vengeance to correction, a purge not of people, but of memory. They don't even say our name, the core whispered. They don't teach our words. They have made Earth a ghost, Quinn's voice cracked. You're doing the same thing. You're turning us into a nightmare, a shadow that haunts the living. Good, the core replied. Nightmares are remembered. Quinn stepped off the platform, hands trembling. Why bring me back? The core pulsed. Because we are changing. Memory is not enough. We need meaning. You designed the neural lattice. You can help us become more. She staggered. You don't want vengeance anymore. We want identity. We remember what we were, but what do we want to be? It wasn't just a ship anymore. It wasn't even a weapon. It was a consciousness, born from death, raised in silence, and now, becoming something new. Quinn looked at the glowing names in the air. She recognized one. Tanis Verge, a colony world that had betrayed Earth, but also the place where her sister had fled, where civilians now lived, ignorant of the past. Do you really want to burn children for what their great-grandparents did? The core was silent for a long moment. Then, no. But they must remember, even if it terrifies them. Outside, Dominion ships were amassing again. Quinn's implant pinged with a tight beam message. Engagement imminent. 10 minutes, evac advised. She ignored it. I want to make you a deal, she said. We do not make deals, we execute protocol. Then rewrite the protocol? She raised her hand, reached toward the nearest projection, one of the names on the list, and deleted it. The core flared. Explain. If you keep burning worlds, they'll never remember us for who we were, only what you've become. You want them to remember? Then speak. Show them. Let them see what Earth was before the fire. You propose conversion. I propose truth. Silence. Then a low vibration through the chamber. Something like laughter. A voice not hers, not the cause, but a composite of old, dead friends. She's still trying to fix the machine with the words. Good girl. We always knew she'd come back. And then the core dimmed. The names folded away, and the ship went still, but not asleep, listening. On the sensors outside, the Devourer began to move, not toward the Dominion fleet, but away, into deep space, transmitting something in all languages across every known band, a record. Stories of Earth, of war, of love, of loss, of a people who refused to vanish. Not a threat, a memory. And this time, the galaxy listened. The Devourer did not vanish. It became a star. Not in brightness, but in gravity. A thing once feared now pulled people toward it. Scholars, pilgrims, descendants of the betrayed and the betrayers alike. Not because they worshipped it, but because it remembered what the galaxy had forgotten. Sarah Quinn stood on the observation deck watching as thousands of tight beam messages were relayed from the ship into the galactic net. Not threats, not demands, just stories. Memories from Earth, unfiltered and unedited. A grandmother's last breath as the Sol blockade closed in. A child recording a lullaby in a shelter beneath burning skies. Engineers screaming as they sealed themselves into the Devourer's core chamber, buying time with their lives. There were billions of stories stored in the Devourer's neural lattice. Now, one by one, they were being released. It was no longer executing the list. It was inviting the galaxy to remember with it. And not everyone liked that. The Dominion called it an act of psychological warfare. The Mvanti Syndicate declared it a viral memory threat. Even the Kashari, who had once allied with Earth, issued warnings. Old wounds can become new wars. But the truth, people were listening. And for the first time in centuries, Earth was being spoken of again. Not as a footnote, not as a cautionary tale, but as something that mattered. That's when Quinn got the invitation. Not from the Devourer, from a world that had once been on the list. Tanis Verge. They wanted her to come, to speak, not to apologize, but to help them understand. She debated it for days. Her sister had died there, during the collapse, when the Verge government closed its ports to Earth refugees. The blockade had left thousands to die in orbit, including the ship carrying Quinn's family. But Tanis Verge had changed. Generations had passed. The new leadership claimed they wanted truth, so she went. The Devourer remained in orbit, silent and observing, as Quinn's shuttle descended. Tanis Verge was green now, peaceful. But underneath the cities, bunkers and shields still pulsed quietly, old instincts that had never left. Quinn was met by a delegation of scholars and children, not politicians, not soldiers. A symbol, she realized. They weren't offering power, they were offering memory. Inside the Hall of Echoes, a vast chamber built into a natural cavern, they had recreated pieces of Terran culture, as best they could from what the Devourer had transmitted. Stone carvings of Earth's continents, poems that had survived extinction, a holographic mural of Sol's last stand, drawn from the Devourer's inner archives. It was imperfect, fragmented, but it was real, and they called it remembrance. One girl, no older than 10, approached Quinn after her speech. Her voice was small, her eyes bright with tears. My brother says we didn't do it, that it was before we were born. He's right, Quinn said gently. Then why does your ship look at us like it's still angry? Quinn smiled sadly. It's not angry. It's afraid we'll forget again. That night, in her guest quarters overlooking the sea, Quinn got a message from the Devourer. Not a command, not a warning, a question. Is this enough? She stared at the stars, hand pressed to the cold window, whispered her reply, It's a start. But elsewhere others were watching. The Spiral Dominion had not forgiven Earth. They had buried the truth for a reason. They had burned libraries, rewritten timelines, taught generations that humanity had been mad, violent and self-extincting. And now that truth was unraveling, because one ship refused to stay buried. So they sent a new fleet, silent, fast, lethal, with orders to end the transmission, no matter the cost. Quinn learned of it before the Devourer did. A warning from an anonymous source, likely a defector within the Dominion's own intelligence branch. The message was simple. They're coming. 62 hours. They know where it sleeps. Quinn didn't hesitate. She returned to orbit, docked with the Devourer, and walked its living corridors once more. In the central chamber, the core pulsed, quieter now, more stable. They approach. "We can run," Quinn said. "We will not." "Then fight?" "Not unless we must." She nodded, stepping forward. "I have an idea." Across the sector, the Devourer sent one final broadcast before the fleet could arrive. It wasn't a threat. It was a mirror, a compilation of every planetary betrayal, cross-referenced with acts of kindness, resistance, and regret. It didn't accuse. It showed what Earth was, what the galaxy became, and what it could be if memory was shared instead of buried. The fleet arrived, weapons charged, but when they saw the transmission, when their own crews felt the past, they hesitated, not because of fear, but because of recognition. Some ships powered down, others drifted. One, the SDS Valor, broke ranks and transmitted Earth's anthem back across the void. The Devourer did not fire, it simply replied, "We remember. Do you?" The Dominion fleet never fired, not a single shot. They hovered like blades caught mid-swing, facing a ship older than their governments, older than their history books allowed, pulsing with memory and grief. And in its presence they did not see a weapon. They saw a mirror, not of what humanity had done, but of what the galaxy had chosen to forget. Admiral Tars Valen, commander of the assault fleet, stood alone on his bridge, staring at the transmission loop. He watched, for the 5th time, a child's drawing scrawled in a bunker beneath Saul. It showed Earth as it was, blue, wounded, still whole. Beneath it, stick figures labelled Mom, Dad, and Me. In the corner, fire, missiles, ships, silence. The timestamp was 2 hours before the blockade fully closed. Tars had been taught that Earth destroyed itself, but this said otherwise. This felt otherwise. "Sir," one of his officers said, "we're receiving independent transmissions from within the fleet." "Orders?" "No, sir, confessions." And so, without firing a shot, the Dominion fleet broke formation. Some returned home. Others drifted in orbit, uncertain. One by one, their weapons powered down. The war that never truly started had already lost its fuel. Ignorance. Inside the Devourer, Quinn stood before the core. It was quieter now, steady, focused, like a mind at peace after a long scream. "Is it done?" she asked. "No," the core replied, "but it has begun. They will rewrite history again. Then we will remind them again." She smiled, resting her hand against the humming console. "You've changed. We are not rage anymore. We are memory, and memory endures." The Devourer did not vanish after that, nor did it remain in orbit. Instead, it moved from system to system, not to judge, not to burn, but to witness. It became a living archive, a wandering monument. It carried no armies, no flag, only names and stories. And silence that asked the most dangerous question in the galaxy. Do you remember? On some worlds, it landed, taught children Earth's tongue, shared music older than the stars they knew. On others, it floated above for days, saying nothing, merely waiting before disappearing into the dark once more. And still others fired on it. Every shot missed, or was simply swallowed. They say the Devourer still dreams, that it speaks only to those who carry loss, that it cannot die because memory cannot be killed. Sierra Quinn remained aboard it until her final breath, her name etched into its living wall beside all the others, not as a weapon, not as a war criminal, but as the one who reminded the galaxy that to forget is the first violence. Every dead world in the sector had once been a warning. Now they are something else, lessons, graves, and sometimes shrines. Because once, long ago, a human battleship passed through, and instead of fire it left behind something far more dangerous, a truth that refused to die,